Welcome back to this already the final segment of the Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I've got J.D. Joyce. He comes on here fairly often. We love to have him here on the program. Author of a great book called The Story of Rich that's really getting some traction. It's a delightful, very smart, clever read. It's fiction and makes something that's not very palpable to most Americans pretty darn useful. And I think it's a great book. J.D., good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Kevin. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. And then I've got a gentleman whose column I've been reading now for a while. Wish I'd been more familiar with it sooner. But Larry Bell, he writes over there at Forbes.com, Forbes magazine, one of my favorite magazines. And I've been enjoying your post over there at Forbes.com. Good to see you, Larry.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Glad to be on.
Glad to have you on. So tell us a little bit, Larry, about your column and the history of which you've been writing it.
Well, I write about anything that's politically incorrect.
Good.
And I'm kind of a policy wonk and political wonk. But I have a book called Climate of Corruption, Politics and Power Behind the Global Warming Hoax. And I'm a space guy, and I don't really have much interest in climate other than the way it drives our policies and our energy policies, insanely so. And after writing the book, Forbes, one of the editors, apparently liked the book and asked me if I'd write an article or two, and it sort of got to be a habit. I write 2 a week now. I've done it for a couple of years.
Very good, very good. And you are covering a lot of different issues, a lot of diversity there in terms of topics and that type of thing. So right now, what do you consider hot in terms of what you're writing about?
Well, the thing that's always hot, of course, is energy, and most particularly how the energy policies are being driven by absolutely insane criteria, the global warming nonsense, for example. And the green energy subsidies, of course, are a big factor as well. So there's a great deal of public misinformation and just ignorance about how limited the capacities are and how costly these alternative energy, so-called alternatives are. And so, I've been writing recently a lot about fracking and pretty much anything about energy. I write, of course, the gun control issue is hot now.
It's exploding, actually, yeah.
I write quite a lot about that. I've written quite a lot recently about Benghazi.
So your work on at Forbes.com is not necessarily about the economic areas. It's really whatever is happening in the public policy front.
Well, the economics are embedded in, of course, all of it.
Certainly.
All of it affects. And so I try to write things that I find are impacting upon people, and of course, money is a big thing that drives our interests and our children's future as well. So,
yeah, and that's a great segue for our other guest, J.D. Joyce. And when you write a book like The Story of Rich, one of the challenges, and again, is about the person who's trying to figure out how to retire well and to live a quality of life after retirement. There's a lot happening on the macro level that affects his micro ability to do that, isn't there?
Yeah, very much so. And unfortunately, Kevin, sometimes people focus on some of these macro issues almost too much. And what I mean by that, regarding their specific portfolio. And so they take that information and they start making tactical moves, and they deviate from their long-term strategy. So I think we need to be always cognizant of what's taking place in the economy, but we also need to hold on to our long-term strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, in the reality of the macro being so challenging as it is, what are some of the principles or thoughts that you try to apply in The Story of Rich to help people navigate through that?
Sure. Well, I think right now, being in January especially, this is a good time to really assess where you are with your goals and objectives. We many of us come up with New Year's resolutions that sometimes only last a day or two, but it's a good time to kind of assess, what do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? Not only in our life, but also in our finances. Mm-hmm. And so one of the key things I would say at this time of year would be just to start by taking a look at, what do we want to accomplish? And then after doing that, then there's a number of different things that we could talk an hour about each of these. But basically, we could start by looking at, how much risk do we want to take? How much money do we need on a cash flow basis from our portfolio? What is our time horizon? These are all key factors that will help steer us towards kind of a long-term plan on how we want to allocate our portfolio.
Yeah. Looking at your business card, you are a space architect.
That's right.
That's kind of creepy or crazy. Never heard of such.
Not creepy.
No, it's crazy.
It's pretty creepy now with our space program being what it
Well,
is.
yeah, absolutely. What space program? What are you talking about? So, yeah, but talk about that. What does that entail? Space architecture. Are you going to be moving to Russia, by the way, or China, or somewhere else that actually has a space program?
Done a lot with the Russians over the years. And,
Yeah.
in fact, my name was on the rocket that flew the first crew to the space station out of Baikonur. But space architecture, as we envisioned, is really the architectures of space systems. So, whereas the engineering professions typically are very focused on one area of technology, we tend to look at all of them and how they fit together into large mission plans and so on. So, we're kind of the general practitioners of space, I would say. That's kind of the role we provide. And my program at the university, most of my graduate students come from NASA or aerospace companies, and they go there to broaden out their experience.
Right. So it's you probably have a relatively mature student body in that degree, because it's almost like a redundant, or something that they found out later that they were going to need.
Very much so, and a lot of them are professionals. A lot of them actually work in aerospace. They work in NASA or Boeing or whatever, and many of them take the program part-time.
Got to have a small class.
It's quite small, and it's not a lecture class. It's a very hands-on, project-centered class. So it's project directed. It's kind of a cool place.
I bet it is. What's the typical size for a class?
I'll have 6 to 9 students.
Wow.
Typically, but
That's hands-on.
Yeah, but right now it's kind of a dismal time because people are wondering, where is the future and is there one? And with commercial activity, hopefully ramping up, we'll see what happens with that. That could open maybe some new doors.
The book that J.D. Joyce wrote is called The Story of Rich, and it's a great story, and I encourage people to check that out. If you put in J.D. Joyce, Story of Rich, he'll pop up really high. Also, again, our other guest, Larry Bell, who has got a fascinating column over there at Forbes.com. His book is The Climate of Corruption. And I tell you this, anyone who doesn't believe that global warming is a hoax needs to read this book, as well as several other great books that are out there that expose the contrived and manipulated science behind global warming that was really designed for controlling us rather than actually improving the environment. That's my opinion. It's designed for control. It's not designed to actually improve the environment. And really, when I was growing up, what was interesting is that we were always taught about the problem of global freezing. We're going to freeze over. And the reality is if you talk to true climatologists, which there's no true climatologist behind a global warming hoax, they get guys with degrees in physics and things like that to talk about this. You talk to true climatologists, they say, well, from what we can tell, from the beginning of time, there's been cycles that are as much as 3 or 4 decades, and people don't have patience to measure 3 or 4 decades of changing back and forth. And so we don't know what they're talking about. So I know what they're talking about. It's a political agenda. It's not an environmental agenda, in my opinion. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you spend it sensibly right here on this great station.